I am Greg Medali. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. I'm the chair of the Professional Advisory Council of the Community Foundation, and the PAC, Professional Advisory Council, is open to people who have facilitated referrals to the organization, to the Community Foundation. Welcome members and welcome guests. Today's program is going to, it's philanthropic case studies, and we're going to talk about how you can work with your clients and with the foundation to come up with customized estate plans that the community and in a way that's consistent with what the client's objectives and desires are. It's an amazing experience. You'll hear some firsthand accounts here. I think it's going to help you figure out how you would be able to have these conversations with your clients. So, and we're also going to talk about the different funds and the different techniques that are available. I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel. Christy Lambertus is a familiar face to many of you professional advisors and attorneys. She's been doing this for, I'll just say decades and decades. She is a past chair of the foundation. She is a philanthropist herself, involved in funding Arts Broward and Broward Library Foundation, among others. And her distinction, what makes her uniquely qualified to speak today, is that she has referred over 20 clients to the Community Foundation. So pretty amazing. Thanks, Christy. Next is Nancy Thies, who is the VP for Philanthropic Services at the foundation. In that capacity, she's sort of the one who puts all this together, who works with the client to develop a plan that uses the client's wealth in a way that is going to move the needle and make changes to make improvements to our community. Then we have Mona Pittenger. Mona is a philanthropist, an entrepreneur. She started a real estate company that managed properties for the federal government in a 5-state region in the Midwest. She has now left the for-profit world and to our great fortune, moved to Fort Lauderdale. And she is an advocate for LGBT rights and involved in her activities have been, she's a founding member of our fund, which is a big local LGBT organization. She's been on the board of directors for Land Legal, which is a gigantic nationwide advocacy group using litigation to protect people's rights and develop equity, diversity, inclusion. And you're going to find out the amazing things that she's doing with the foundation. Finally is Kurt Zimmerman, also no stranger to you because he is a former chair of the Professional Advisory Committee. He's the current chair of the Community Foundation. And he also is a longtime, well-respected trust and estates attorney and a philanthropist involved with Broward County, the Performing Arts Center of Broward, White School, with Big Brothers Big Sisters. And he is one of the people who worked with Mona and the foundation to put together the amazing plan that you'll hear more about. And Mark Kotler is the director for philanthropic services here, and he is the next one on the list. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Greg. I have to mention, Greg is the chairman of our Professional Advisory Council, and he puts in many hours behind the scenes to make these events happen. Before I get started, I have to thank the staff that is involved on the team with me and with Nancy, and in particular, Ashley, Mary Margaret, Andrea, and others behind the scenes who put these events on. It would never happen without them, and it's really great to have a team like that working here. So I hope you get a chance to do that. Just want to mention a couple of our celebrities that are here today. Some of them are online, so you can't see them until the Q&A section in the set at the end. But we do have past board members and board chairs, as well as past PAC members and PAC chairs. We have Joan Crane and David Scully. David is a board member currently, and Joan is a past chair. So they're online, as well as Judy Bonavec, who's a past board member and past chair of PAC, and she's online too. And Lou, oh, he got on. Lou, I'm glad you're here. Lou was supposed to be here in person, and luckily he joined us online. And the past chair of the PAC. So we have many celebrities, a bright group here. Okay, so I just wanted to get started. And what we're going to be doing today is exploring charitable funds at the Community Foundation of Broward. First, we want to hear about an overarching concept, which is endowed versus non-endowed funds. And then we're going to move on and learn about the different fund types and their applications in real life cases, as Greg mentioned. And we're going to learn in how we partner and how advisors partner with their clients and the community foundations to make these happen. First, there are a couple of brochures that are at your tables I want to draw your attention to because they're relevant throughout this program. This one right here, Your Charitable Fund Made Easy, outlines all the different charitable funds that we're going to be outlining today. And the other one will come up later, has to do with the Family Foundation Select Fund that we'll talk about during private foundation conversation later. So these are just tools that'll help illustrate what we're going to talk about today. But to set the framework for this conversation, I really would like to call on Nancy, who will be talking about the overview of the different types of charitable funds here. Nancy.
So much, Mark. Let me cue up the next slide, please. There we go. So we thought it'd be great to start on a high level so you can understand the different types of funds that we offer and the different fund structures. Because we're going to be talking about a lot of different types of funds today when we talk about donor stories. So this might help in framing the whole conversation for this morning. So there are basically two different types of fund structures that we offer. You can either set up your clients can either set up an endowed fund or they could set up a non-endowed fund. And probably you're most familiar with non-endowed. So I'm going to start with endowed funds. And these types of funds are designed to be here in perpetuity. It's to carry on your client's legacy here in the community, to impact the issues that they care about most forever in Broward County. And the annual spend on those funds is about 5% of the fund balance. Those funds are invested for slow growth over time. And the investment strategy is different for an endowed fund than it would be, let's say, for an aggressive strategy that you would have for your own portfolio. There's a lot of push and pull in our portfolio and really designed to have a long-term slow growth and perpetual growth of that fund over time. And these funds are wonderful because they also provide a source of sustained resources to the causes and to the organizations that donors most care about, or a scholarship that they most care about. Non-endowed funds are also available, and those funds are for a donor who's looking for, sometimes it's short-term, but sometimes, and most of the time, it's a long-term view on their philanthropy. They might set up a fund for $250,000. It might have some major granting that they need to do within a given period of time that would exceed a 5% distribution rate. So we often see that the donor who needs a little bit more flexibility will establish these non-endowed funds, but it's not unusual to hear about Mona that they might need more than one fund type. You might have an endowed fund to think long-term impact, and also a non-endowed fund that will supplement their philanthropic strategy. One thing you might find interesting is that our story as a community foundation has always been focused on creating those long-term permanent resources that can be here for this community. We all see how fundraising can be fleeting. You know, you raise money, dollars in, then it goes right back out. Dollars in, goes right back out. But our view is that we need to build philanthropy for this community for the long term. So we've always emphasized endowed funds, and that's very much reflected in the numbers you'll see on the next slide, that 90% of all the assets that we have, maybe 93% even, are endowed funds. All right, so next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about the different types of funds that we offer. It's very interesting when we have conversations with your clients. Many of them think that a donor advised fund is it. It's the only kind of fund that is offered as an opportunity for them to make a difference with their philanthropy. But there are actually multiple fund types that we offer. And I'm going to start with an unrestricted fund. This is the beautiful Marlene Holder. You have a little brochure on your table that tells her story. I love the story about Marlene because, you know, she was a woman who was a social worker. She had modest means. She didn't do a ton of philanthropy in her lifetime, but she really wanted to create an impact beyond her lifetime. So she worked very closely with her estate planning attorney, who is Karen Spigler, who is part of the Professional Advisor Council here at the Community Foundation. They talked about how they can carry on Marlene's spirit through a fund at the Community Foundation. She gave back. She had a soft spot for people who were of modest means themselves, who were struggling, and often faced eviction. And then when Karen talked with her about the fund, she said, you know what, I'm going to surmise it like this, that Broward County is like her child, and that the Community Foundation is its mother. I love this. And she knew that the foundation would take care of her child, her community forever in Broward County. So I thought that was such a neat story. So Marlene, upon her passing, she had some real estate and she had a few assets, investment accounts, and her estate actually seeded a fund with a $1.7 million gift, making her a community foundation, a community builder in this community. To date, since 2019, when that fund was seeded, it's granted out $166,000 already. It currently stands at 1.8 million, and it's designed for growth of the long term. Make one more comment about unrestricted funds and how important they are to a conversation with the donor. You know, we talk about so many of our donors are entrepreneurs. They came here, they built a business here, they love the community, they're grateful to giving back to the community. An unrestricted fund is the most entrepreneurial of all the funds that we have. It's able to pivot on a dime when something unexpected happens in our community. And we saw this happen just in the last 2 years, as we all know. We're all excited to be back together again. When COVID hit, organizations had to shift their thinking and how they delivered services. And some even had to deliver services beyond their normal scope. For example, libraries were delivering food to people. How did they, anticipate that? But these unrestricted funds would enable these organizations to continue their impact, to change their focus as needed to ensure their sustainability and ensure their impact in the future. So that's the only story I'm going to tell on these fund structures. So on field of interest funds, that's the next one to consider. Field of interest funds are set up by donors who have a passion for a specific issue. For example, you hear about Mona, who has a passion for racial equity, justice, and inclusion, and diversity and inclusion. Her work is going to focus on this particular area that she has a passion for. Other donors say, I'm all about cancer research. So you'll see the Community Foundation making some significant grants in this area. This is because donors have entrusted us to help people in Broward County with groundbreaking research, and we have the means to do this. These are the entrepreneurs who have set up these field of interest funds and empower the community foundation to make a difference to their issues. Donor advised funds, I think you're all very familiar with this. These types of funds give your clients probably the greatest control over their account. They're able to recommend grants to the areas that they are most interested in the community. Then we have designated funds, and these are for donors and clients who are very interested. Let's say they've got a specific organization that they were involved with in their lifetime, that they sat on the board, or if they, support a cause like the American Cancer Society. These funds enable donors to say, okay, I want to support 10 different organizations upon my passing. Community foundation ensure that the monies go to these organizations, and please make sure that they are always remain in existence. If they don't, I need to empower you to determine where a like-minded organization can be chosen as a substitute. Then we also have got scholarship funds where we work with donors to help set up criteria around scholarships, either locally or through their alma mater, nationally, internationally. And agency endowments are nonprofit endowment partners who set up these funds to forever sustain their mission. So they create an endowed fund here. There's a 5% distribution that goes back to the agency or the nonprofit in perpetuity. It's established by the nonprofit. Give you an example, Meals on Wheels just established an agency endowment with us. They received some Mary McKenzie money. They carved off about $100,000 of that gift to create a permanent fund here that will provide flexible resources to them forever in perpetuity. And by the way, the minimum to create all these funds is $25,000, except for scholarship, except for agency funds, which are $50,000. And then I also want to give you a little disclaimer. You don't have to know all this stuff. This is a lot of inside baseball. When you send your clients to us, we work with them to determine what's the best fund strategy for them and the best approach for them. And quite often it involves multiple fund types, but you don't have to know all that detail. Just know we're more than donor advised funds for you as well. And then just a quick recap here. I just want to let you guys know that it's interesting. If you take a look at the fund mix for the foundation, our biggest buckets of funds combined are the designated, unrestricted, and field of interest funds, making up about $150 million of our assets, I believe, maybe a little bit more than that. We have probably 200, 300 funds that are of that fund type with the community foundation. Donor advised funds, we have 140 of these funds, making up about $47 million of our assets. And then they're followed by the scholarship funds at about $7 million in our assets, and our agency endowments, which make up about $56 million of our assets. Another interesting thing maybe you might know, is this where we have the talk about endowed versus non-endowed on the slide or next? Okay, so that we had a bar chart at one point that we were looking at that showed a very small sliver of our funds are non-endowed. So again, 93% of our assets are endowed, they're here forever for the community. And that includes on our donor advised funds as well. Most of our donors are looking at that long-term impact for Broward County. That's it, right?
Yeah. Wonderful job, Nancy. So to put some, yeah, please.
I noticed on Marlene, I don't know if this is fun, Marlene Holder's fund, the starting balance and the grants, it actually had a higher balance over time. Is that what you generally see within a balance?
Yeah, absolutely. When I look at the lifetime of a fund, we look back at those funds that were started, let's say 20 years ago. It's a good mark, 20 or 22 years ago. Most often you're going to see that the fund has exceeded the original gift in grant making. So if it started with $1 million, it might have granted out $1.1 million over the course of that time. And then the fund will either be it had grown a little bit over time as well. So it might be worth $1.1 million. In this market today, the market is fluctuating. We're seeing, a dip in our portfolio, but there's a calculation that we do to determine what that 5% is based on, and it's based on a 12 quarters, am I saying that right? 12 quarter rolling average, about a 3-year rolling average value of that fund at any point given in time. So it smooths out the highs and the lows so that we can be fairly consistent in the amount that's given out to the community. Hopefully that helps.
So I'll try to remind our panelists to use microphones.
Oh, yeah. Did you hear me? Sorry about that.
Sorry. Not COVID. I've been tested and tested. So to put a personal face on this, I wanted to bring in Mona into the conversation because talking about endowed versus non-endowed, Mona had all of her funds as non-endowed in other organizations prior to a recent shift towards having endowed permanent funds. And I just wanted Mona to comment on.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. I began my journey with community foundations in Tulsa, where I am from, about 20 years ago, based on the advice of my estate attorney, because it was the first time I'd actually put together an estate plan. And it really, I did that because my net worth was changing pretty quickly as a result of the success of my business and government contracts. I liked the idea of a donor advised fund that was not endowed because I had total control. I could do what I wanted when I wanted, and if I didn't like them, I could move the money. So I like having control, and I found it very transaction based. I didn't actually get a lot of benefit from the community foundation from an advice standpoint or anything else. Fast forward, I was a founding member of Our Fund Foundation, which is an LGBTQ foundation really focused on Broward County for the most part. And I was a founding board member that knew something about community foundations and established, again, a non-endowed fund there where I could have control. And as a new organization, I wanted to make sure that they were going to make it. So if I saw something that didn't look good, I was going to move those funds out somewhere else. Over that 20-year period of time, I have redone my estate plans 5 times. When I retired, my business did very well. My philanthropy changed, my focus changed. And when I got on the board of the community foundation here, it was actually for very selfish reasons. I thought that I could actually bring something to the party because I had spent 20 years around community foundations, so I thought I knew something about them. But I also wanted to get something from the relationship, and I knew this organization was different. So when I came on the board, I was really kind of looking under the tent. Jennifer had been on board for about 6 months. I knew Linda Carter from her previous tenure, even though I'd never had a fund here. And the first thing that I heard about early on was the Mary Porter Grants Committee. And I found out that Mary Porter had quite a bit of money, and she had established an endowed fund at the Community Foundation. And upon her passing, those monies, she had no heirs, those monies came into an endowed fund here at the Community Foundation. And I said, oh, there's a grants committee. Like, what are they doing? Well, they do it every 4 years, and it was kind of a big deal. I mean, we put out $2 million. So I said, can I be the fly on the wall and sort of observe this process? And so I did, and it really shifted my thinking around endowed funds. And it really shifted my thinking around a legacy that I could leave because I have family and nephews, and I think everybody should paddle their own canoe so they can build their own wealth. I'm going to do with my wealth what I want to. So I really wanted to go to work in the broader community and actually make a positive difference somewhere. So it's a great way to partner with a community foundation with an endowed fund and know that you can leave a legacy, know that you can define where you want those monies working, know that those monies, because with any luck at all, the investment returns will equal or exceed what is being put out every year at that 5% level. If you just do the math, I'll be long gone and my money will still be working to the causes that are important to me. So that was really, once I redid my estate plans with this young man here, an endowed fund was really the only option for me.
We'll circle back with Mona to hear more about her philanthropy a little later on as well. But we want to have some more stories mixed in right now and give you a perspective of really how different fund types are and were implemented in planning. So, and this is all done in concert with all of you as state planners or wealth advisors or CPAs. So I want to pull in Christy in the conversation now because she worked with one of South Florida's best known women's feminists, actually, and her name was Annette Van Howe. And Christy, she established a field of interest fund. So can you tell us more about this client and her background?
Well, Annette was originally from Chicago and she lived in upstate New York. And she was married and divorced twice, but had no children. And some of you may remember Annette Van Howe picketing the Tower Forum because they wouldn't allow women, along with Edie Green and one other. Okay, I digress.
That's good.
She was a riot. I referred her to the Community Foundation and then we could start a fund with $5,000. This was 1992, 20 years ago. Oh,
No,
Lord.
30.
Oh my gosh. And now it's 25,000. So she was one of the clients I had chosen to refer. And I think the thing that made me the proudest was after she was gone, it funded a reception room at the, I guess it's the women's shelter up in Deerfield.
Oh, distress.
Women in distress, and that, I mean, she'd be so proud. So owing her death in 1998, 400,000 of assets poured into the fund, and I think that it's even that much has been given out.
Yeah, and Nancy, you know more about the fund and how we worked with Annette and her fund since then. So if you can illuminate that.
One of the wonderful things about Annette's fund is that it has granted out $317,000 over the course of the years. And, you know, to your point, Christy, we always, when we look at these field of interest funds, we keep pretty extensive notes about our donors so that 50 years ago, or 50 years from now, excuse me, when the staff has changed, you know, and times are different, people can still read, our staff can still read the notes and get an idea of what was this person all about, and try to align the grant making into something that would make her smile, just like we were talking about with women in distress. But her fund has gone to support, you know, we also look at these funds and the dollars available with strategy in mind. And I encourage you, when you get a chance at the end of the meeting, maybe take a look at this wall over here. It shows our grant making framework, and it talks about where the Community Foundation has set a priority on moving the needle on critical issues in our community. So while Annette's fund could stand alone for some things, we might join the resources by Annette's fund with other resources provided by other donors, aligning those. So let's say Annette's fund could grant out $10,000, but a specific initiative might cost $100,000, and we might need to grant that. We leverage each other, all these donor funds together to create even a bigger impact. So I think, you know, thinking about her entrepreneurial spirit and her wanting to make a difference, I think she would really appreciate knowing that she is continuing to make a big impact today.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, with Annette, we were able to enact some of the most effective strategies in order to empower women in the community. But some of your clients may want greater control and say, I want to be involved in making the decisions to what organizations the funds are going to go to. So there's the largest fund type in the country is a donor advised fund that's growing exponentially, not only at the Community Foundation, but in external financial institutions, and allows a high level of involvement with in grant making. So Nancy, if you don't mind shifting and talking about what the triggers are for donors to establish a fund and what makes a donor advised fund at the Community Foundation different or advantageous to maybe one in a commercial institution?
It's interesting, you know, you as advisors can see that your clients go through pivotal times in their lives. You know, they retiring, they may have sold a business, they may have gotten a windfall from selling real estate, or they might have appreciated assets and they need to, you know, include a charitable component for tax reasons. Whatever the trigger is, quite often there is a reason to come to the community foundation once a client has some sort of windfall that they are experiencing. And they can use that windfall to seed a fund at the community foundation. They could also use an IRA, by the way, for a charitable distribution, but that would need to go into one of the funds that are technically out of the donor's control, which would be like a field of interest fund, a designated fund, or an unrestricted fund at the foundation. They still have that opportunity. We could work with them. But commercial donor advised funds, I would say, you know, from the Fidelities of the world, are convenience funds in a way. You know, they can set them up. I talk to many people say, oh yeah, I can see my charitable fund right there with all my other investments with Fidelity, and it's easy. I just make a quick little grant from it and it's done. And we see a lot of those donors are more interested in just in the convenience factor. You know, they really want to just quickly make a grant. They may not necessarily be looking for a partnership. But when they come to the community foundation, we really are looking at a partnership with your clients. We want to help them. We want to wrap around them. We want to help them create a strategy for their philanthropy and really get the biggest bang out of their buck, you know, by leveraging with other donors, or by investing in some, you know, joining us on strategic priorities to make an even bigger impact in the community. You know, we provide a high level of service. We have a full donor services team that works directly with every single one of our donor advised funds. And I think our average fund value, Carol, I think is around $400,000, right? Around $400,000. At that level, we notch it up a bit with our donors, and we'll work with them to help them figure out, you know, talk with them about their values and their interests, and help them create their own personalized mission statement, a philanthropy mission statement, and develop real strategy around their giving. So our fees are a smidge higher than you would see at a commercial donor advised fund, but we are wrapping around them, inviting them to educational meetings that we're having. We're having one tomorrow where they get a peek at the new YMCA, but then also learn about what's happening in the community to empower people. They meet other donors who are like-minded. They get to come to all of our events, and we provide them with research and tools to make their philanthropy the best it can be.
Nancy, if I could just comment on that, all those features that you're describing, what happens is it deepens the relationship between the advisor and the client. Clients appreciate that, and they appreciate the recommendation that you as an advisor are sharing with them. So it reflects well on you as an advisor in the process. So the secondary benefits.
And as Kurt would know, if you're in the Professional Advisors Council, so for those of you who are guests and not part of our Professional Advisors Council, you are invited to every program that we do with donors, going from the celebrations to the educational programs. So it gives you an opportunity to bond with your clients in a non-transactional way outside of the office. So Nancy had mentioned about getting to know the donor. And one process that we do exclusively here is called Values 360. Mona went through this process, and I'd love for her to comment a little bit about it.
When I first was first of all, it was my estate attorney in 2003 in Tulsa who referred me to a community foundation. I didn't know what community foundations were at that point in time. So you guys are really critical to helping philanthropists and people plan their estates. I love Tulsa, it's my hometown, very transactional, never heard from them, didn't go through a process. Our fund foundation, founding board member, understand the organization, really didn't go through a process. Once I was on the board here, I really started to, as I was looking under the tent, I really did see the value that was provided by this community foundation, which I have to tell you is not like other community foundations that I've been exposed to. I didn't even know there was a thing called the Values 360. I mean, I could sit down with somebody that would actually help me understand what really were the things that motivated me, that I was excited about, that I was passionate about, and kind of help me bring that out, almost in a, without it being an interview format, more like almost a game that we were playing. And Nancy, took copious notes and really tried to memorialize a lot of what I said during that Values 360 process. And from there, we were able to craft the statements that are now within my estate plans. And Nancy referenced notes that are kept here at the Community Foundation for the donor who, way after the passing and all the retirement of this staff, can actually look in my file and say, well, who was this woman? What was she about? And how do we align what she wanted with grant making today in an environment that's very, very different? And this goes back to the reason of having an endowed fund. In my situation, my assets are going to collapse into the endowed fund. And I have 3 different funds that I've set up. I want to recognize Amanda Kaw over there, who really got me excited about a lot of this process, because Amanda was very effectively and very efficiently running the grant making for the Mary Port Foundation fund that was set up here. So Mary's fund, just to, if I can digress a little bit into that, Mary's fund was about a $40 million fund at her passing. And one of the things, she had, I think, more than one fund as well. One is a capital fund, and that was the committee that I was a fly on the wall. And what did such a terrific job. And also the 2 people who chaired that committee. As I was involved in that, Mary Porter's goal was to fund capital projects in Broward County. So there were 21 grant proposals that we reviewed, an entire 4-inch binder that Amanda organized, and we got, and these were oftentimes very large capital projects, 20, 25 million projects. And I found the process so thoughtful. I found the people whose money it was not so engaged. And I thought, wow, this is really kind of a cool thing. I mean, everybody's working for Mary. Mary said she wanted, and she's been gone for a decade, I think at least. Everybody's working for Mary, and Mary's plan is still unfolding. And there's going to be money 4 years from now, again, to do this all over again. So I was pretty taken aback with the power of an endowed fund with a very specific driven purpose. And more than that, when people talk about value of community foundations, this community foundation fees may be a little bit higher than other community foundations. I certainly know they were than what I paid in Tulsa. I didn't get anything in Tulsa. They managed my investments. They got a return. I got a phone call 2 years if there was a tornado, and a tornado. That was pretty much it. But here, there is really a very deep bench of staff that understands what's going on and is very committed to doing the very best possible job. And that's what I've learned as a board member. And that's frankly why I was confident enough to set up an endowed fund and work with a state planning attorney to revise those plans yet again, to make sure that my money is working way long after I'm gone in things that I really care about. And the 360 process is a terrific process. I don't know anybody who does it. The statements that we crafted and revised and edited and modified to make sure that whoever, you try to make it kind of a living document as well, because I don't expect to check off from planet Earth anytime soon, but every time I do an estate plan, I make the assumption that, I could be drawing my last breath today. And if that's the case, will my money work after my passing the way it would work if I were directing it or being engaged in it now?
It also sounds like, Mona, the level of your philanthropy and probably your estate could have led you down the road towards a private foundation. Did you consider that? Was that brought up with your estate planning attorney?
So on estate plan revision number 4, I was using a local attorney here in Broward, and I thought that with my asset base, I should have a private foundation. And that is exactly what he crafted for me. So on my passing, my assets would, the corporate trustee would make sure that that private foundation got established and the assets would collapse into it. And I had a friend who I'm very close to, and I said, he could be the person that would kind of help direct where those grants went because he knows me. And when I saw the way the Mary Porter grant situation worked, I realized the folly of thinking that a private foundation made sense. What I realized was that I was taking a very good friend who would do the very best possible job he could do, and I was burdening him with my assets and the responsibility to put my money out into organizations that he thought I would like. And I realized how undoable that was. I mean, how difficult for him. He was going to have to hire staff. He was going to maybe need to either leave his job or hire somebody to do those things. And I thought, there's already bad infrastructure in place here at the Community Foundation of Broward. The funds are invested and managed effectively. We have an outside investment committee that watches that. We've got good internal controls, good audit controls. We have people in grant making who understand how to run that process. We've got the people in this room and the people on the board know what the needs of the community are. And we have this great 360 process that really to be in grant making. I mean, I kind of think, gosh, if I lived another 30 years, that'd be awesome. But what would it look like if my money was still working 50 years from now and still putting out enormous impacts into the community in what is I'm passionate about is racial justice, diversity, and inclusion. And that's not a problem we've solved yet. I don't think we will have solved it in 50 years, but I certainly want money working in something that I'm really passionate about. So the private foundation, from a fee standpoint, doesn't make any sense. They're cumbersome. There's a lot of administration. You're required to put out 5% a year. You've got to have staff or family or friends that are going to. How is somebody 50 years from now going to be able to work on my private foundation and understand me? They won't even know me. But here, I'm a part of this organization. I've got a file that says this is what this woman wants. This is who this woman is. This is where she wants her money going to work. And it just makes a lot more. It's just, frankly, it's a bargain. I came in thinking the fees were a little bit high, only because of my relationship with the Tulsa Community Foundation. But what I've learned is that the fees are really probably too low, that you actually get so much backroom support, advice, grant making help, et cetera, that I really, again, I think maybe the fees are too low, but don't raise them on my.
So also turn to Kurt, because he also has the insider's view now, being our board chair and chairing of the PAC. When someone comes to you, Kurt, they say, well, I want a private foundation. What is that conversation? How does that go? What are you trying to find out to see if that's the best option for them? Or like Mona decided a community foundation fund or series of funds would be better.
Funny story, I was sitting in Mark's office yesterday, we were just briefing for this event today, and a text comes into my phone from a client saying, I want to set up a private foundation, can you do that for me? So I think probably you all hear that from your clients as a first reaction, right? Thinking about setting up a private foundation. I think it's just a lack of awareness on their part of the different options that they have here versus the private foundation. But my starting point is first to understand what's driving that reaction. What do they want to accomplish? What are their underlying goals? And as advisor, my job is to help them explore that and present the options on the table and talk it through and come up with the best solution. And often that does happen to lean in the direction of one of these funds here. And the reasons for that, for one, I'll say anonymity. A lot of donors do appreciate anonymity. Private foundation, you're putting out there on your 990, your name, your address, who in some cases who your donors are, who your grantees are. And whereas with a fund here, none of that is public knowledge. Simplicity, Mona did a great job of describing that. It's just far simpler having a fund here versus having to organize a board, do tax returns, et cetera. They're involved with a private foundation. Then we talk a little bit about the notion of leveraging your giving with other donors. when you're a private foundation, you're a little bit on an island. Whereas when you become a fund holder here, you join a whole ecosystem of other donors, staff, the expertise of the staff that you can describe so nicely by everyone here. And it opens your eyes to things that you never would have seen otherwise had you been functioning alone as a private foundation. There are some tax benefits too to the fund here versus a private foundation. The level of deductibility that you get with a fund here exceeds that of a private foundation. Sort of in summary, you sort of get all the good stuff and none of the bad stuff. Yeah, that's kind of the stuff. So by the time that conversation is over, sometimes people want a private foundation. That's fine. But in most cases, I find that the funds here are a superior choice. The other thing I didn't mention was the notion of control. Donors like the idea of control. But in reality, when you get down to how the funds actually operate here, they really do have a similar level of control, I would say, versus the private foundation. So that's, at the end of the day, it's not a big differentiating factor. So that's kind of the overview.
And this has been brought to our attention too about this, different aspects of private foundation that are so attractive. So we pulled together a kind of I could say, a donor advised fund on steroids, and it's called the Family Foundation Select. It's really for those people who are on the fence. Do I do a family foundation? Do I create my own fund? And we've kind of coalesced some of those things that they wanted into this fund, and the higher level of attention, like from Amanda Ka and all the things that we can do at a level of commitment that could have gone into a private foundation. In fact, we codified that there's a brochure on your table called Family Foundation Select. And it really just briefly outlines that and why this is a great option. And they can get the best features with the benefits that the community foundation can provide as well. So to shift gears now from donor advised funds and private foundations to those people who have specific organizations that they either fund, or that they're not sure which organizations that they want to fund, but they have an idea like, oh, as mentioned, well, cancer has affected my family, and I'm sitting in my advisor's office and I say, let's put something in my estate plan for cancer. And I've heard from advisors that say, estate planning attorneys usually, who say on occasion that they sit at their office and they say, I have organizations, or let's Google and see which ones fit yours best. And then they actually name the organization as a beneficiary in their estate plan. Now, we at the Community Foundation have what I think is a superior alternative, which is called a designated fund. Nancy went over that, where you can name specific organizations, and then instead of getting a bequest at one time, they'll get endowed a stable, I'd say, cash flow over the life of the community to their organization. Christy, if you could illuminate, like, how does that conversation go? When someone doesn't know or has an organization they want to fund?
And Dell came to me with a foundation, and we needed to modify it. You're right. Over the decades, organizations can change. The Philharmonic is the classic example of, one that no one thought was going to go broke. It did. So usually a big outright gift isn't the answer. Dell wanted to benefit a number of organizations. And she had worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of the Interior, because she was appalled by the treatment of the American Indian So that was her two focuses, and her brother, who was killed in Guam in World War II. So that was her focus. She didn't have children. And like Kurt, I prefer to refer people to community foundation versus private foundation. And we had to go to the judge twice, Spicer, to get it modified and finally to get rid of it. And she had to ask him out on a date both times.
Was that a requirement?
Yeah, really. She was a hoot. And when she died, she had named a number of organizations that were going to be beneficiaries of her funds. She closed an annuity, she made her life insurance payable to the fund, everything she could think of. So she really did a number on all of us. So that's.
Mark, can I add one thing on that?
Yeah, please.
When I was on the board of Lambda Legal, which is the legal rights organization for LGBT issues, it was about a $15 million organization in 2004. And one of the issues that came up at the board was somebody who had passed unexpectedly and had left an enormous amount of money, like almost $15 million, to the organization. And there was a lot of consternation around what are we going to do with this huge influx of cash? And if we build a program, how are we then going to be able to sustain those programs? So I think donors think that they're doing a really nice thing when they land a huge chunk of money on an organization, and it is a nice and generous thing, but it can be very difficult for those organizations to manage those inflows. And so I think to set up something at a community foundation where those funds are managed and invested, and those monies at 5% is in funding that organization, and they see a perpetual income stream is one thing. The other thing is if the organization goes out of business, you can find an organization that has similar purposes and move it into that. So it's just a much more flexible vehicle.
And picking up what Kirsty said about two things. One was that she had numerous organizations. Actually, Dell had, her fund has the most organizations named as any other. I think it's 26 organizations, because she was very involved in her lifetime in giving, and her fund was a donor advised fund to start with, and then shifted into a designated fund later. So she worked really closely with Amanda on that. But one other thing I wanted to bring up was what you mentioned about the different assets. You said that she had an annuity, which she ended up giving to her fund here, and made us a beneficiary of life insurance. Another thing that she did was interesting is that she was so involved in her designations that she couldn't give a QCD, or a qualified charitable distribution, from her IRA because it was a donor advised fund in her lifetime. So she took it as the income, she paid the taxes, and then donated the same amount to us, and then claimed it as a tax deduction because she wanted in that donor advised fund so she could be involved in her grant making. So all these different assets, we'll find a way for you, your clients, to utilize, and they all can be in one way or the other. So Nancy, we worked as a staff with her for many years, and you knew her. Can you just close up the story a little bit?
Actually, I'll correct that. Amanda Codd knew her very well, right? Worked with Dell for many, many years. Just a couple little things to add to the conversation on this. When we create a fund with a donor, we're also looking at what happens to the fund when this donor passes away. What's the succession plan for the fund? Do they have some loved ones that they want to advise on the fund? So we can actually appoint a successor advisor, and on her donor advised fund, which is still in existence today, actually, her nephew is advising on a portion of the assets that stayed with that fund. So that's something to keep in mind. We can, if there are children involved or loved ones involved, we can work on that. The other thing to think about, we always have to think about is what's going to happen to the fund, in the future. What do I want to have happen to the fund? And so when her nephew passes, that fund will actually go into her designated fund. The remaining assets will go into her designated fund to support the 26 organizations that she's chosen. Another thing to think about too, when you're planning, so let's say you've got a client who wants 26 organizations named in their estate documents, in their trust, and they're changing their mind every 6 months. They get worried, as people get older, they get worried. They want to make sure that these things are codified, can be changing. We work with your clients on the other end through a testamentary agreement, which Christy Lambertus actually created. It's a document that sits with us where your client can say to you, I put a codicil in my trust document that says I'm going to create a fund in my name, a community foundation, upon my passing, to follow the instructions on the books with the community foundation. We create this testamentary agreement with them with all their philanthropic wishes. We can change it, we can modify it with them as the donor changes their mind. There's no additional charges. And I know that's not great news if you want your billable hours, but there's no cost, and your client will see that as a value add in their relationship with you. So know that we do that, and we do that regularly.
Yeah, I bet some folks in the room have had clients say, can I just attach a Schedule A to my trust that I can change, this beneficiary, that free at will? The answer is no, you really can't. But this vehicle actually does allow you to do that with respect to the charitable organizations.
Yes, and we do that in partnership with you, with your client, to make sure we're all communicating and we're representing, everybody's clear on what the wishes are of your client.
So contrary to someone like Dell, who knew us intimately, and we knew her intimately, because she was constantly, revising her list of organizations. There are people that will come to your office as clients who will name the community foundation as a beneficiary, but they will not. They'll say, "Don't tell them. Let it be a surprise when I'm gone." Which surprises are good, but there are reasons to encourage involvement with us, or at least getting us an initial meeting to talk with them. And I know that, Kurt, you often encourage your clients to consider that rather than to keep it anonymous from us. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, it's totally up to the client. When we do
Hold the mic closer.
Sorry. That's a decision for the client to make, of course. Some people prefer to be anonymous, and it's fine. But I think it's incumbent on me as their advisor to mention that if you do disclose that you've named the community foundation in their will of trust, you then join in on certain informational events that we have. We have Food for Thought events, we have Legacy Society lunch, we go to different places where we've made grants. You get to do an on-site visit and you meet other donors, and there's just a whole, as I said before, kind of an ecosystem of philanthropists that you become a part of. And I think in most cases, people really like that, particularly if it's a client who might be new in town, it's looking to plug in, to feel a part of the community. This is a great vehicle for that.
Thank you, Kurt. In respect to time, I don't think we really need to dwell on scholarships and agency. We think we covered that, right? So what I'd also like to just add on to what Kurt said is that people later in their life also, they have a shrinking, let's say, life with, they're no longer working, their friend group is shrinking, or family. And I've seen them here during events that they just connect with the other philanthropists because they have that in common. It's a new group for them to feel excited about. And none of our events are fundraisers. They don't cost any money. and I hope for those of you who've been here, you'd say that we do it as classy and as engaging as possible. And so we really look at that as an opportunity for them to be engaged in the future. So what I'd like to do now, just so we don't miss the opportunity, is to first, if you have any questions for the panel. So opening it up online, if you have online, please text them.
Mark?
Yeah.
I just want to make one more kind of statement based on what both Kurt and Nancy helped me with. I think I mentioned earlier, I've redone my estate plans 5 times. I actually don't plan on redoing my estate plans because I don't have to, because Kurt really helped me see that if I have a good framework on my estate plans and I'm working with the community foundation, that everything can be done within those community foundation documents. Not only does it save time and money and brain damage, then you have the 10/9/2003 as amended in 2007, and it was amended, and I mean, it's just a lot simpler. So I just wanted to emphasize that that is a much more efficient way for your clients to, we all evolve over time, and it gives us a way to continue to evolve what our passions are and make those modifications without having to go back and incur the cost of working with the attorney again and having yet one more document.
And I would like to give a shout out to the financial advisors that were involved too. I don't know if you want to say by name, but it's up to you, Mona. But they were extremely
You mean the
helpful.
Northern Trust?
Yes.
Yeah, they've been incredibly, so part of what happens in my estate plans is all of my money is essentially, I've called out a few organizations who will get direct bequests, but mostly it's going into the endowed funds that I've already established. And Northern, who will step in as the corporate trustee, really can facilitate all that on my behalf. And it gives me a lot of confidence, just the relationship that Northern has with Kurt, Kevin, an estate attorney as well. So he reviews all the documents. So Northern understands what I want. The relationships are there. And again, all may look very different 30 years from now if I'm still around and thinking about philanthropy, but I always make my plans, and I really encourage people to make their plans. If you step out in today and you take your last breath, you really should hope that you can control from the grave. That was my goal.
And that team approach, I find is really helpful. Kevin gave us some great thoughts, and the Community Foundation is part of that team. They're kind of a philanthropic partner in that whole effort. So all of you in the room play a super important role, working together to make the client's plan come to life.
So I'll leave it to you, the questions that you have of our panelists. Kevin.
So are you seeing now areas for people's plans and they're inefficient from a state plan standpoint, that they can be charitable, seeing that more where they're putting charitable beneficiaries in rather than doing it through their own trust?
I think
Repeat
Christie's
the question, Kurt, repeat the question.
The question from Kevin was, are you seeing more frequently clients thinking of doing charitable giving by way of their IRAs through qualified charitable distribution?
Or as the beneficiary?
Or as a designated named beneficiary? And the answer is I often lead with the thought that if you're going to engage or include a charitable recipient in your estate plan somewhere, why don't you consider doing it by way of your IRA? And I know Christy is one of the champions of this thought. Number one, it's super simple. Number two, there's some tax advantages to it. You can change your mind from time to time by way of changing the beneficiary designation. So it's kind of the first option I would present as a way for including a charitable recipient in the plan. Christy, I don't know how you feel.
I think so too, especially since you explain to the kids, well, if they get this, they're gonna have to take it out in 10 years and it'll all cost them money. And if you give them this, it won't. That's a no-brainer.
If I can just add to, which is interesting, we do have donor advised funds that have successor trustees, maybe the kids are their successor, I'm sorry, not trustees, wrong word, successor fund reps, fund representatives. And if the parents have a highly appreciated IRA, they can make their donor advised fund a beneficiary of it. It can pass through the estate plan to donor advised fund, unlike QCDs cannot. So it's another option as well for that.
We just established a fund for Jeff Baskey's had connected us with his client and just established a fund. Mom passed away. The proceeds from the IRA actually created a donor advised fund here that the son is advising on. So it was a great move and better for tax purposes in the estate as well.
Floor is open.
I'm wondering about how, if the donor decides like the level, like how people access the money in terms of like the level of a barrier. So if it's a grant to the community, can that donor say, I want it to be a high barrier or a low barrier to access it, like that grant process? Make a decision on how that's gonna play out.
Are you asking if we can put some guardrails around it and say, okay, they get this grant if
Right, or
they do X, Y, and Z?
right, and deciding whether or not you want to make it a high barrier, like I want it to be really challenging for people to get the money, or I want to make it a very easy process for people to get the money. Like,
I mean,
let's say easy, like something accessible.
yeah, we've worked with both in both scenarios, but we do try to find a way to make the grant really meaningful, possibly by not putting a lot of guardrails on it, because when you do that, you narrow your pool of ability to really make a difference. Like we've seen that with scholarships, for example, where the criteria are just so difficult to attain that you can't find any candidates for it. So we really try to think through a situation with a donor and guide them in the best way possible so that their money can actually make a difference. Sometimes when there's so many guardrails, you're stuck. You can't make a difference with it. So we advise them in that way as well. I hope that, yeah. And we've done some matches before and things like that as well.
Well, it's not a question, but I'll share a quick testimonial because as you all know, I recently had the privilege of introducing someone to the Community Foundation who became a community builder. And the story starts many years back when her family established their own private foundation. She's an only child and she also inherited family wealth. So she had these two buckets of wealth going. And I had the great privilege of working with her on that foundation. And it does great work in the community, and a very trusted firm here in town, Truist, manages that foundation for the family. But this woman, Nancy Brown, who is a community builder, she had her own wealth. She's an only child. She's not spending through that wealth. And I started planting the seed years back about the idea of establishing her own fund in her own name that aligned with her personal interests. Not that she wasn't aligned with her family interests, but her personal interests diverged. And so it took many years of conversation and patience on the part of the staff here to work with Nancy, and she went through the 360, and that was an amazing experience for her because it really helped reveal some of her own interests and her life story. And her life story is one that started when she was in college and she studied abroad, and it was life-changing for her. And so we talked about establishing a fund that would provide scholarships for young people to study abroad and give them the same experience that she had so many years back. And so that's the route she went. And the foundation did a great job of guiding her through that. And now she has the pleasure of not only advising her own family fund and the money that goes out for its causes, but now her own fund here at the foundation is helping young people. And she has the privilege of seeing them go travel and hear back about their experiences. So it's been a really good situation for her, for me, for the foundation, and the process.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that story. And it brings up a really important point that I didn't want to overlook, which is it's not a binary choice, private foundation or fund. You can do both. And we see a lot of examples where a private foundation will have what we call a companion fund here for various reasons. One of which they like to tap into our expertise and knowledge in certain areas and help them with the grant making. Another might be that at the end of the year, they need to give out that 5%, and that fund is the vehicle that receives that required distribution. The
there are multiple examples of where the private foundation and fund together here working. I didn't realize that Nancy had the private foundation as well, so it's good to know.
And one more time on to that, we, just last year, one of our new community builders, just a year ago, approached us and said, have a private foundation, give out the money, don't want it anymore, can you help us? You know, so they converted it, and actually they were thinking of their next generation too, and the next generation wanted to stay involved in philanthropy, but didn't want to stay involved with all of the management of the private foundation. So they created 2 donor advised funds. One of them was non-endowed, so that the patriarch of the family can continue to give big grants out of that. But he also and his wife recognized that he wanted to have something for the next generation that would be sustainable. So they created an endowed donor advised fund for their children. And so that worked well for them. Everyone was happy. And it was a nice option for them to do that. So converting that is another option if that's desired, if that fits. Last question, anyone? Is Greg still in the room? Because I do not see him. He had to go. Okay, so no, I'm happy to pinch it for Greg. So thank you, Mark. You did a great job on this. As always. I really want to thank the panel. They're a terrific group. Not only they have this knowledge at the top of their head, but they really did prepare. And that's why the slides actually match what they were saying. They really did prepare for this. So it was a great job. Thank you. I want to thank all of you for attending, always our PAC members, and for all your involvement, and for the guests that are here today. We do encourage you to become involved. To talk with us when you have a client that's appropriate, or just questions you have about philanthropy that you want to get answered. We're your go-to place, and we're happy to be here. I want to recognize our team so you know who to talk to. Mary Margaret Toole. Mary Margaret is my partner in working with professional advisors. Matt Codd. Matt is now taken on working with all of our Legacy Society donors and new donors as well. You may have heard of Nancy Thies, who leads our department. So we're all here for you and anyone on our team. And Andrea and Amanda, of course. Well, that's right. Our team is expanded with our donor services. We used to be separate, now we're together. So Amanda, and we also have, well, she's not here. She's ill today. Not my fault. There's Jasmine. She's also part of our team. Okay, I want to remind those who are financial advisors, if you have a CFP, that when you sign the forms, and everyone, Jennifer's holding up the form, bro. There we go. Make sure each of you please sign out the log. And if you have a CFP to put your Social Security last 4 digits, covered issue it, that can come to us later and we can add those in. As I said, PAC members are invited to our event, and we have one tomorrow. If you like doing last minute decisions, it's at the YMCA downtown, the LA Lee YMCA and Mizell Community Center. It's our field day, we call it. It's tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We have our Community Builders Celebration, our most glitzy and fun event of the year, where we celebrate our community builders. We just had a few, 9 of them this year, which are $1 million endowed funds. So we're going to be celebrating them on November 1st at the Four Seasons Hotel. So if you're a PAC member, please join us. It's a great event. Right, Penelope? Great event?
Yes, always.
Also, our next PAC meeting is on February 1st. So please put it on your calendars. We'll send out an announcement in the near future. You can RSVP to any of these events, to any of the staff members, let us know. I said about signing the log, and completion certificates will be handed out at the door, as well as stamps for your parking, so we can validate your parking. Those of you who are either CPAs or attorneys, you know you'll self-report your credit hours. We will report for the CFPs. That's it. I covered all of the grants.
How long before you